"You, the janitor in the back, come here now." Victoria Sterling's voice sliced through the Chicago theater like ice cutting glass. 2,000 heads turned in unison. 3 million people watching the live stream froze mid-scroll. Marcus Hayes stood paralyzed under the backstage lights. Yellow rubber gloves still clung to his hands. He'd finished mopping the stage floor 8 minutes ago. The diva strode toward him in her shimmering gown diamonds catching every spotlight. She grabbed his shoulder and dragged him into the center stage like pulling a broken chair into view. "Let everyone see," she announced, her smile sweet enough to rot teeth, "whether you can actually sing or whether you're just taking up space here." She snapped her fingers at the band. Sharp, commanding, the way you'd summon a waiter. "Play Breaking Point for him, the impossible note, the same note that once earned me $3 million. The band hesitated. Victoria leaned close to Marcus, switching off her own microphone. But his mic was still live. Her whisper echoed through the entire auditorium, carried to every screen, every living room, every phone in 3 million hands. "Fail quietly, kid." The air froze solid. Marcus stood there, 2,000 eyes in front of him, a world behind him passing judgment through glowing screens. His hands trembled, not from fear of failing, but from what he was about to expose. Because what happened next wouldn't just prove Victoria Sterling wrong. It would bring down everything she'd built on lies. If you love stories where truth faces power, drop a comment with your city. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let me take you into Marcus's world. 5 years earlier, everything was different. 5 years earlier, Marcus Hayes had been somebody, not the man in the janitor's uniform standing under Victoria Sterling's contempt, not the father scraping together pennies for his daughter's heart surgery, not invisible. He had been the voice everyone talked about. American Voices Season 12, the finale night that broke records. 42 million viewers tuned in to watch 10 finalists compete for a recording contract worth $500,000 and a career that could change everything. Marcus had made it to the final 2. At 32, he was older than most contestants. While college kids with perfect teeth sang covers of pop hits, Marcus brought something different. A rare, high tenor voice with a range that stretched from C3 to C7. But range meant nothing without control, and Marcus had spent 15 years training that control. His voice could shift between registers like water flowing over stones. Chest voice to head voice to whistle register so seamlessly that listeners couldn't pinpoint the exact moment the transition happened. Music professors called it a gift. Victoria Sterling, sitting in the judge's chair, had called it once-in-a-generation talent. The stage at the Civic Opera House had felt like home that night, the lights hot on his skin, the audience a living, breathing thing in the darkness. Marcus had sung Puccini's Nessun Dorma in the semifinal and brought the entire theater to its feet. He remembered Victoria standing her hand over her heart, tears streaming down her face. Real tears, or what he'd thought were real. "Marcus Hayes," she'd said into the microphone, her voice breaking with emotion. "You just reminded me why I fell in love with music. That was transcendent." The other judges had agreed. Unanimous golden buzzers, social media exploded. By morning, clips of his performance had been viewed 80 million times. Everyone said he would win. The betting odds were in his favor. Music industry executives were already making calls. His manager had fielded 17 offers from record labels before the finale even aired. Marcus had one more song to sing, just one. Then everything he'd worked for his entire life would be his. He stood backstage in his tailored suit, breathing exercises, keeping his nerves steady. The show's host was introducing the final segment. The band was warming up. In 3 minutes, Marcus would walk onto that stage for the last time as a contestant and walk off as a champion. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He almost didn't answer. Protocol said no phones backstage during live shows. But something made him look at the screen. Northwestern Memorial Hospital. His heart stopped before his brain caught up. "Sarah," he answered. A voice he didn't recognize, professional and urgent, told him his wife had been rushed to the emergency room 20 minutes ago. Acute pneumonia. Critical condition. Oxygen levels dropping. They needed him there immediately. Marcus stood frozen. Behind him, he could hear the roar of the audience, the lights, the cameras. 42 million people waiting for him. The opportunity he'd chased his entire life, the dream he'd sacrificed everything for, was 3 minutes away. In front of him was the only thing that mattered more. He didn't ask for permission, didn't explain, didn't even take off his stage makeup. Marcus ran. He burst through the backstage exit into the Chicago night. No coat. November wind cutting through his thin dress shirt. He flagged down a cab and gave the driver double fare to run every red light between the Civic Opera House and Northwestern Memorial. Sarah was already unconscious when he arrived. Pneumonia had progressed faster than anyone expected. The infection was in her bloodstream. Her lungs were failing. The doctor said words like septic shock and multi-organ failure and prepare yourself. Marcus held her hand. It was cold. He kept holding it anyway. On television, American Voices continued without him. The producers scrambled. The host made an announcement. Technical difficulties. Marcus Hayes unable to perform. The other finalist won by default. By midnight, social media had turned into a firing squad. Irresponsible, unprofessional, disrespectful to everyone who believed in him. People who'd never met him decided who he was based on his absence. 3 days later, Sarah died. Emma was born the same day, 10 weeks premature. 1 pound, 8 ounces. So small, she fit in Marcus's palm. The NICU doctor said she had a ventricular septal defect. A hole in her heart. It would need surgery, they said. When she's stronger, when she weighs more, when she has a better chance of surviving. Victoria Sterling appeared on Good Morning America that week. Poised in a cream-colored blazer, her expression carefully crafted into disappointment tinged with compassion. "I want to be clear," she told the host, her voice soft but firm. "I have sympathy for Marcus's personal situation. Truly. But talent means nothing without professionalism. Anyone who doesn't respect an opportunity doesn't deserve a dream." The interview was clipped and shared millions of times. It became the definitive statement on Marcus Hayes, the man who threw it all away, the cautionary tale. Record labels pulled their offers. His manager dropped him. Casting directors stopped returning calls. Within 6 months, Marcus Hayes had been completely erased from the music industry. He never contested it, never tried to explain. Sarah was gone. Emma needed him. That was all that mattered. 5 years passed like water through a broken dam. Marcus worked 2 shifts every day. Morning custodial staff at the Chicago Theater, the same venue where dreams happened for other people. He mopped the stage where stars performed, cleaned the bathrooms, emptied the trash. $8 an hour plus benefits that covered 40% of Emma's medical bills. Evening dishwasher at an upscale restaurant on Michigan Avenue. Hot water scalding his hands. Grease and food scraps until midnight. Another $8 an hour. He slept 4 hours a night in their apartment in Lincoln Park. 2 bedrooms. The heat only worked in one. They slept together in the same room, Emma's small bed next to his, so she wouldn't be cold. Emma needed open heart surgery. The estimate was $92,000. Insurance would cover 40%. Marcus needed $55,000. The hospital had given him 2 weeks to come up with a plan, or they'd have to push the surgery back. Again, Emma's condition was deteriorating. Every week, she grew paler, tired faster. The hole in her heart was getting bigger. But there was one thing Marcus had never lost. Every night after his shift at the restaurant, after the long train ride home, after checking Emma's medications and reading her a story, Marcus would sing. "You Are My Sunshine," Sarah's favorite song. He sang it softly, carefully, like singing any louder might shatter the fragile membrane between memory and grief. Emma would close her eyes, her small hand reaching for his. "Daddy's voice makes my heart feel better," she whispered one night. The ICU nurses had noticed it too. Emma's heart rate monitor showed significant stabilization whenever Marcus sang. Her oxygen levels improved, her breathing steadied. They couldn't explain it medically. Charts and graphs don't measure love. But Marcus knew. It wasn't technique, it wasn't pitch, it wasn't a miracle. It was the only thing he had left to give his daughter. His voice, the thing that had cost him everything and saved nothing. Except maybe Emma's life one lullaby at a time. So when Victoria Sterling announced she would be hosting Voices of Hope, a charity gala at the Chicago Theater to raise money for the pediatric cardiac unit at Northwestern Memorial, Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. The same hospital treating Emma, the same condition, the same surgery his daughter desperately needed. Victoria's face was on every poster in the theater. Her voice on every promotional video. Tickets were $500 each. 2,000 seats. $1 million in ticket sales alone. Marcus scrubbed floors beneath those posters. He cleaned the bathrooms where wealthy donors would refresh their makeup between performances. He polished the brass railings they'd grip while congratulating each other on their generosity. And he said nothing, until the night of the gala when Victoria Sterling grabbed him by the shoulder and dragged him into the light. The night of the gala arrived with the kind of manufactured perfection only money could buy. The Chicago Theater had been transformed. Crystal chandeliers that normally hung dormant blazed with light. Red carpet stretched from the street entrance through the lobby. Photographers lined the velvet ropes, their cameras hungry for celebrities and donors worth photographing. Marcus had spent the previous afternoon helping the event crew set up, moving chairs, testing microphones, polishing the stage until it reflected the lights like black glass. He'd seen the program printed on heavy cardstock, gold lettering embossed on cream paper. Voices of Hope, an evening with Victoria Sterling, benefiting the Pediatric Cardiac Care Unit at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. 2,000 tickets at $500 each. $1 million Victoria had announced at the press conference 3 weeks earlier, tears glistening in her eyes as she spoke about giving children a fighting chance. Marcus had watched that press conference on his phone during his break. Watched Victoria standing at a podium surrounded by photos of sick children, her hand pressed to her heart, her voice breaking with perfectly calibrated emotion. One of those photos was Emma. Marcus had signed the consent forms 6 months ago, when the hospital asked if they could use patient images for fundraising materials. He'd thought it would help, thought it might bring in donations that could save his daughter and children like her. He hadn't known Victoria Sterling would be the face of that campaign. The gala began at 7. By 6:30, the lobby was thick with perfume and expensive cologne. Women in gowns that cost more than Marcus made in 6 months. Men in tuxedos discussing stock portfolios and vacation homes. Marcus wore his custodial uniform. Navy blue shirt with his name embroidered over the pocket. Work pants. Steel-toed boots. He was assigned to backstage support, which meant he was invisible. Exactly where he preferred to be. The main auditorium filled quickly. Marcus could hear the murmur of 2,000 voices blending into white noise. He could see the cameras set up for the live stream, their red lights glowing. The production assistant with the headset said they already had 3 million viewers tuning in online. 3 million people watching Victoria Sterling perform charity. Marcus pushed a cleaning cart toward the backstage green room. The hallway was quiet, insulated from the noise of the crowd. He could hear Victoria's voice coach running through warm-up exercises behind a closed door. Scales ascending and descending. Professional. Precise. He kept walking. The stage itself was empty. Marcus had mopped it earlier, but someone had spilled coffee near the piano. He grabbed his cleaning supplies and knelt down, scrubbing the dark stain from the polished wood. That's when he heard the rehearsal begin. Victoria's voice strong and clear, filling the empty theater. The band played the opening chords of Breaking Point, her signature song. The one that had launched her career 15 years ago. The one with the impossible note that only she could hit. Or so everyone believed. Marcus froze his hand, still on the wet floor. He'd heard this song 1,000 times, knew every note, every phrase, every breath. His trained ear cataloged the sound automatically. Victoria's voice in the lower register was solid, controlled. Years of professional training evident in every perfectly placed note. But then the song climbed into the bridge. E4, G4, B4. Victoria's voice followed steady and strong. D5, E5, A5, still good, still controlled. But Marcus heard something shift, a tightness creeping into her tone. Her neck muscles straining, shoulders lifting slightly, compensating for the effort. The melody kept climbing toward the climax, toward the note that defined the song, the note that had made Victoria Sterling a star. D6. Victoria reached for it. Her voice cracked. The sound shattered at C-sharp 5, nearly 2 full steps below the target. It broke like glass, hitting concrete jagged and wrong. Marcus's hands went cold. Victoria stopped singing abruptly. He heard her clear her throat, the sound echoing through the empty theater. When she spoke, her voice was casual, dismissive. "My throat's too dry. Can someone get me water?" Footsteps, a stagehand rushing to comply. Victoria took a sip, then called out to the sound booth. "Turn up the backing track, louder. I need more support." Marcus rose slowly from his crouch, hidden behind the side curtain. He could see Victoria on stage, her back to him. Could see the sound technician in the booth adjusting levels. "From the bridge," Victoria commanded. The music started again. This time, when the song reached the climax, the note rang out perfectly. Crystal clear. Flawless, exactly as it sounded on her albums, on her live recordings, on every performance Marcus had ever heard. Too perfect. Marcus had been training his voice since he was 12 years old. 15 years of lessons of studying classical technique, of learning to distinguish between natural sound and artificial enhancement. He could hear frequencies the average person couldn't. Could identify the exact pitch of a note within a few hertz. And he could tell the difference between a human voice and a recording. That D6 had a metallic sheen to it. A digital smoothness that live vocals never possessed. The note sat on top of the harmonic structure instead of weaving through it. It was too clean, too consistent, too impossible. That note didn't come from Victoria Sterling, it came from the speakers. Marcus's mind raced backward through 5 years of silence, 5 years of believing he'd thrown away his career, 5 years of Victoria's words echoing in his head. Anyone who doesn't respect an opportunity doesn't deserve a dream. She'd said it on national television, said it with tears in her eyes and conviction in her voice. She'd destroyed his reputation with that single sentence, turned him into a cautionary tale, made sure every door in the industry slammed shut before he could even knock, while she'd been lip-syncing the note that made her famous. Marcus stood in the shadows, his cleaning rag dripping water onto the floor, his heart hammering against his ribs, his hands shaking with something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite fear. It was clarity, He needed to know more. The janitor's closet backstage had a small desk where the custodial staff kept their schedules and timesheets. Marcus locked the door behind him and pulled out his phone. He searched Voices of Hope Charity Gala Victoria Sterling. Dozens of articles appeared. Glossy photos of Victoria in designer gowns surrounded by sick children and grateful parents. Headlines praising her generosity, her commitment to giving back. Marcus scrolled deeper. Past the promotional content. Past the press releases, looking for something real. He found it buried on page 3 of the search results. A small article from a local investigative blog published 14 months ago. The headline was dry, almost boring. Charity Gala, Financial Transparency Questioned. Marcus read it 3 times to make sure he understood. Of the $1.2 million raised at last year's Voices of Hope Gala, only 12% reached Northwestern Memorial Hospital's pediatric cardiac unit. The remaining 88% was allocated to what organizers described as administrative expenses and production costs. 12% of $1 million that meant only $120,000 actually helped sick children. The rest gone, swallowed by Victoria's management company, event production, marketing for her personal brand, payments to her publicity team. Marcus kept reading. The article quoted an anonymous hospital administrator. "We're grateful for any donation, of course, but when donors believe their $500 ticket is saving a child's life, they should know that only $60 of that ticket actually funds medical care." His hands were shaking so hard he nearly dropped his phone. Victoria Sterling was profiting from sick children, from Emma, from every parent sitting in a hospital room praying their child would live long enough to get the surgery they needed. She was standing on that stage tonight bathed in admiration and applause, while children died waiting for the money she promised to deliver. Marcus thought about Emma asleep in their apartment, thought about the ICU nurses who'd become like family, thought about the $55,000 he needed in 2 weeks, or his daughter's surgery would be postponed again. Postponed until it was too late. He thought about Victoria's voice cracking on that high note, about the backing track covering her failure, about 15 years of lies packaged as inspiration. Something ignited in his chest. Not rage, not even righteous anger, just a cold, clear certainty. Marcus Hayes had been silent for 5 years. He'd accepted the destruction of his career, accepted being erased, accepted invisibility. He'd done it because he thought he'd made a choice. Family over fame, love over ambition. He'd thought there was honor in that sacrifice, but Victoria Sterling had built her empire on fraud, had silenced him while she stole voices that weren't hers, had stood on a pedestal constructed from other people's talent and other people's suffering. Marcus put his phone away, straightened his uniform, looked at himself in the small mirror hanging on the closet wall, a 32-year-old man in a janitor's uniform, invisible, powerless, broke, and completely done being quiet. He unlocked the door and walked back toward the stage. The gala was about to begin. 2,000 people were taking their seats. 3 million more were watching online. Victoria Sterling was about to perform the lie that made her famous, and Marcus was going to be there when it all came crashing down. The lights dimmed at 7 o'clock sharp. Marcus stood in the wings hidden behind the heavy velvet curtain. From here he could see everything. The 2,000 faces turning towards the stage. The cameras positioned at perfect angles. The production crew moving silently through the shadows. The orchestra began. A soft, swelling prelude that filled the theater with anticipation. Then Victoria appeared. She walked onto the stage like she owned the oxygen in the room. Her gown was midnight blue, covered in sequins that caught every spotlight and threw fractured rainbows across the audience. diamonds at her throat. Hair swept up in an elegant twist, the image of perfection. 2,000 people rose to their feet before she'd sung a single note. Victoria smiled. That practiced smile Marcus had seen in countless interviews. Gracious, humble, the smile of someone who knew exactly how much power she held and pretended not to notice. She lifted her hand, and the applause died instantly. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft and intimate despite the microphone. "Thank you for being here tonight, for opening your hearts and your hands to these beautiful children who need our help." The screen behind her flickered to life. Photos of children in hospital beds. Small faces, some smiling, some too sick to smile. Medical equipment surrounding them like mechanical forests. Emma's photo appeared third in the sequence. Marcus's breath caught. His daughter's face enlarged to 20 feet tall, her dark eyes looking directly at the camera, the nasal cannula visible beneath her nose. Her small hand holding a stuffed elephant he'd won for her at a street fair. Victoria didn't turn to look at the screen. She knew the photos were there, had probably approved every one of them. "Every child you see behind me is fighting for their life," Victoria continued, her voice thickened with emotion. Real or performed? Marcus couldn't tell any more. "Every one of them deserves a chance, a future, hope." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the crowd. Tonight is not just about music. It's about giving these children what they need to survive. Every ticket you purchased, every dollar you donate will go directly to Northwestern Memorial Hospital's Pediatric Cardiac Care Unit, directly to saving these precious lives. The lie was so smooth, Marcus almost believed it himself. The audience erupted in applause again. People were crying. He could see them dabbing at their eyes with cloth napkins, moved by Victoria's compassion. Marcus gripped the edge of the curtain, his fingers aching from the pressure. Victoria performed 3 songs first. Standards, safe choices that showed off her vocal control without requiring anything extraordinary. Her voice was good, well-trained, polished, professional, but nothing special. The kind of voice you'd hear in 1,000 theaters from 1,000 talented singers who'd never quite become stars. After the 3rd song, Victoria paused to take a sip of water. The audience waited in reverent silence. "This next song," she said, setting down the crystal glass, "is very personal to me." She looked out at the crowd, her expression transforming into something vulnerable, something honest, or another lie. Marcus couldn't tell any more. "Breaking Point" was the song that changed my life 15 years ago. Many of you know it. Some of you were there the night I first performed it at the Lyric Opera House. Murmurs of recognition rippled through the audience. The song requires a vocal range that pushes beyond what most singers can achieve. The final note, a D6 in the whistle register, is considered by many in the industry to be impossible to sustain in a live performance. She smiled. That practiced humility again. But I believe that when you push past your limits, when you believe in yourself completely, you can reach heights you never thought possible. That's what this song represents to me. That's the message I want to share with those children behind me. Never give up, never stop reaching. The audience was hypnotized. Victoria turned to the conductor and nodded. The orchestra began. The opening measures of Breaking Point filled the theater. Haunting. Beautiful. Building slowly toward the climax everyone was waiting for. Victoria sang. Her voice moved through the verses with confidence. The lower register was solid. The middle register controlled. She hit every note cleanly, every phrase shaped with professional precision. But Marcus heard what the audience couldn't. He heard the strain creeping in as the melody climbed, heard the slight breathiness that shouldn't be there, heard the tiny adjustments Victoria made, the way she modified vowels and cut phrases shorter to compensate for the effort. The song moved into the bridge. E4, G4, B4. Victoria's voice followed, still strong. D5, E5, A5. The strain was more obvious now, her neck muscles visible even from backstage, shoulders rising slightly with each ascending note. The orchestra swelled, building, the audience leaning forward in their seats. The moment was coming. The impossible note, the one that had made Victoria Sterling a legend. Victoria opened her mouth. The D6 rang out across the theater, perfect, clear, flawless, sustained for 5 full seconds before resolving down into the final phrase. The audience exploded, standing ovation, cheers, applause like thunder. But Marcus had heard the truth. That note hadn't come from Victoria's throat. It had come from the speakers. The backing track turned up loud enough to mask her failure. The digital perfection of a studio recording layered over her live performance so seamlessly that no one noticed the seam. No one except someone who knew what to listen for. Marcus stepped out from behind the curtain. He didn't plan it, didn't rehearse it, didn't even consciously decide. His body moved before his mind caught up. 1 step, 2 steps, into the dim light at the edge of the stage. Victoria saw him immediately. Her eyes locked onto his face. Recognition flashed across her features, followed by something colder, something calculating. She knew exactly who he was, the contestant who'd walked away, the cautionary tale she'd created, the ghost she'd thought she'd buried 5 years ago. A slow smile spread across her face. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria said, her voice carrying that false sweetness again. "It appears we have a special guest tonight." The spotlight operator followed her gaze. The beam swung around, catching Marcus in its glare. 2,000 heads turned. 3 million people watching online shifted their attention from Victoria to the man in the janitor's uniform standing at the edge of the stage. Marcus blinked against the sudden brightness, his heart hammering, every instinct screaming at him to run, but he stayed. Victoria walked toward him, her gown glittering, each step deliberate, theatrical. "Marcus Hayes," she announced to the audience. "Some of you may remember him." A few murmurs of recognition from the crowd, scattered whispers. 5 years ago, Marcus was a contestant on American Voices, incredibly talented, one of the best vocalists I'd ever heard. She paused, letting the past tense hang in the air. He made it to the finale, was favored to win, actually. But then, at the very last moment, right before his final performance, he walked away. Disappeared. No explanation. No apology to the show, to the other contestants, to the millions of people who'd voted for him. The murmurs grew louder. Marcus could feel the judgment settling over the audience like fog. "My wife was dying," Marcus said. His voice was quiet, but the acoustics of the theater carried it to the first few rows. Some people heard. Some people leaned forward, trying to understand what he'd said. Victoria either didn't hear or pretended not to. "And now look at him." She continued, gesturing to his uniform, the yellow rubber gloves still hanging from his back pocket, the cleaning cloth draped over his shoulder. "Working here, cleaning up after successful people, after people who honored their commitments." A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the audience, the kind of laughter that comes from not knowing how else to react. Marcus felt the heat rise in his face, felt the familiar shame he'd carried for 5 years, the weight of being defined by a single moment, a single choice. But underneath the shame was something harder, something that had been building since he'd heard Victoria's voice crack during rehearsal. "How touching that he's here tonight," Victoria said, "contributing to this wonderful cause. even in his small way. The condescension was surgical, precise, designed to wound without seeming cruel. "Come up here, Marcus," she said suddenly. Her smile widened, eyes bright with something that looked like generosity but felt like a trap. "Come on, don't be shy. Let's give our audience a little extra entertainment tonight." Marcus's legs felt like concrete. Every fiber of his being wanted to turn around, walk back into the shadows, go home to Emma. But if he did that, Victoria would win. She'd keep lying, keep using children like Emma to fund her brand, keep building her empire on stolen talent and manufactured compassion. And someday Emma would grow up, would find this video, would see her father turning away, would think he'd been a coward. Marcus walked onto the stage. Each step felt like walking through deep water. The audience was a blur of faces. The lights were so bright they erased everything beyond their edges. Victoria handed him the microphone. Her hand was cold when it brushed against his. "Make yourself comfortable," she said. "Just do your best." The audience was silent now, curious, uncomfortable, watching this strange scene unfold. Before the band could play a single note, Marcus spoke. "Miss Sterling, I have a question." Victoria raised one perfect eyebrow. Her smile never wavered. "Oh, go ahead. Could you turn off the backing track?" The air in the theater changed, a subtle shift, like the moment before lightning strikes. Victoria's smile tightened at the edges. "The track is part of the arrangement, Marcus. It's how the song is performed. But during rehearsal," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his pounding heart, "you sang without it." His microphone was still on, every word carried to every seat. "You sang alone." The murmuring started, quiet at first, growing. "Sound check is different from a live performance," Victoria replied. Her voice had an edge now, sharp beneath the sweetness. "Then, could you sing it first?" Marcus continued. "Just you, no track, so I can learn how you do it." 3 seconds of absolute silence. Then Victoria laughed, sharp, dismissive. "You want me to audition for you?" "No," Marcus said quietly. "I just want to know whether you can actually sing it." The theater exploded. Gasps, shocked laughter, the sound of 2,000 people suddenly paying very close attention. Victoria stared at Marcus like he'd slapped her across the face. The cameras caught everything. Every micro-expression, every flash of rage beneath her composure. "Of course I can sing it," she said through clenched teeth. "I've been doing it for 18 years. "Then prove it," Marcus said. And for the first time in 5 years he felt completely free. Victoria Sterling had built her career on control. Control of her voice. Control of her image. Control of every narrative, every interview, every public moment. 18 years without a single crack in the facade. But standing on that stage under lights hot enough to make her makeup run, facing a janitor who'd just called her a fraud in front of 2,000 people and 3 million live stream viewers, Victoria felt control slipping through her fingers like water. She turned to the sound booth, her voice sharp enough to cut. "Turn off the backing track, all of it." The sound technician hesitated. Marcus could see him through the glass, his hand hovering over the controls, looking to the stage manager for confirmation. "Do it," Victoria snapped. The technician pressed a button. The rich layered backing track that had been supporting Victoria's voice suddenly disappeared. The orchestration became sparse, bare, nowhere to hide. The audience shifted in their seats. This wasn't part of the show. This wasn't the polished, rehearsed performance they'd paid $500 to see. This was real, and everyone could feel it. Victoria raised the microphone to her lips, took a breath, let it out slowly. Then she began to sing. Her voice filled the theater, strong at first, confident. The opening verse of Breaking Point sat comfortably in her range. She moved through the lyrics with the ease of someone who'd performed this song thousands of times. The audience began to relax, shoulders dropping, a few people glancing at Marcus with expressions that said, "See, you were wrong." She can sing, but Marcus listened deeper. He heard the subtle tightness in her tone, the way she modified certain vowels to avoid strain. The tiny breath catches that most people wouldn't notice, but that told him everything he needed to know. The song climbed into the second verse. Higher notes, more demanding phrases. Victoria's voice followed, still good, still controlled. Years of professional training evident in every carefully placed breath. But the ease was gone. Marcus watched her neck, saw the muscles beginning to stand out, saw her shoulders rise slightly, the universal sign of a singer compensating for lack of breath support. The bridge approached. This was where the song transformed from impressive to impossible, where the melody climbed into a register that separated competent singers from exceptional ones. E4, G4, B4. Victoria's voice stayed with the melody. Strong, steady, her technique holding. D5, E5, A5. The strain was visible now, her face reddening slightly, jaw tight, the tendons in her neck like cables under her skin. The audience sat forward. Some of them were musicians, vocal coaches, people who understood what they were witnessing. The rest just knew that something felt different, harder, like watching someone climb a mountain without safety equipment. The orchestra swelled, building toward the climax, the moment that had made Victoria Sterling famous. The impossible D6. Victoria's mouth opened, her body tensed, every muscle engaged in the effort of reaching that note. The sound that came out was wrong. It cracked, split, shattered at C-sharp 5, nearly 2 full steps below where it should have been. The note broke apart like glass hitting concrete, jagged and painful. The theater went silent. Not the anticipatory silence from before. This was the silence of shock, of 2,000 people collectively holding their breath. Victoria stopped singing, dropped the microphone from her mouth, cleared her throat softly. When she spoke, her voice was steady, practiced. The voice of someone who'd learned how to recover from mistakes in front of audiences. "I apologize," she said, with a small embarrassed laugh. "My throat is quite dry. This is exactly why we use backing tracks in professional performances, to protect the voice during extended shows." She gestured to a stagehand who rushed forward with a bottle of water. Victoria took a sip, smiled at the audience. The moment of vulnerability carefully packaged into something endearing. The demands of live performance are quite different from studio work, she continued, her tone conversational, intimate, drawing the audience back to her side. Any professional vocalist will tell you that. A few people nodded, accepting the explanation, ready to move past this awkward moment. But Marcus had heard enough. "You can't sing it," he said. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, but the microphone in his hand carried every word to every corner of the theater. Victoria turned to him. The smile on her face hardened into something thinner, more dangerous. "I just explained," she said slowly, "that my voice is tired from the previous songs. But on your album," Marcus replied, his voice gaining strength, "you sing that note 32 times, I counted." The murmuring started again, louder now. "And in every live performance video available online, you hit it perfectly, every single time. In concerts that last 2 hours, 3 hours, when your voice should be even more tired. Victoria's face was changing color, red creeping up from her collar. "I don't know what you're implying," she said through clenched teeth. "I have perfect pitch," Marcus said. He wasn't looking at Victoria anymore. He was looking at the audience, at the cameras, at the 3 million people watching this moment unfold in real time. "I can hear frequencies, identify them within a few hertz." He paused, let the technical language settle over the crowd. "The note on your album is 1174.7 hertz, D6 in the whistle register." Someone in the front row pulled out their phone, started searching, fact-checking. "The note you just attempted to sing was 1108.7 hertz, C-sharp 5, nearly 2 full steps lower." "That's enough," Victoria said sharply. But Marcus continued, his voice steady, clinical, the voice of someone presenting evidence. "And the voice on your album doesn't sound like yours." The theater erupted. Whispers became conversations. Phones came out. People typing, searching, sharing. Victoria strode toward Marcus, grabbed his arm. Not hard enough to hurt, but enough to control, to stop him from speaking. "This is completely inappropriate," she hissed, close enough that only he could hear. "You need to stop talking, right now." But his microphone was still live, and when she'd grabbed his arm, she'd pulled him closer to her own microphone. Everyone heard. Marcus looked at her hand on his arm, looked at her face, saw the fear beneath the rage. "The album credits," he said, clearly pulling his arm free, "list additional vocals by someone named Sienna Rose." He looked back at the audience. "I checked before the show. Sienna Rose is a studio singer based in Austin, Texas. She specializes in whistle register vocals, session work, background vocals for artists who can't hit the high notes themselves." "That's a standard industry practice," Victoria said loudly. "Session singers provide harmonies, support vocals. It doesn't mean, it means—" Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through hers, "that the note that made you famous, the note you've built your entire career on, the note you just claim to have sung thousands of times in live performances, isn't yours." "You don't know what you're talking about," Victoria shot back. But her voice was shaking now, the control fracturing. "During the rehearsal this afternoon," Marcus continued, "I heard you try to sing this song without the backing track. You cracked on the exact same note, at the exact same pitch, C-sharp 5. He turned to face her directly. "Then you told your sound technician to turn up the backing track, to give you more support. And suddenly when you sang it again, the note was perfect." Marcus paused, let the implication hang in the air. "Because it wasn't you singing, it was a recording. The same recording you've been using for 18 years. The theater had gone completely silent. Even the live-stream chat had frozen. 3 million people waiting for Victoria's response. Victoria's mouth opened, closed, her carefully constructed composure crumbling in real time. "This is defamation," she finally managed. "Slander. You're accusing me of fraud based on nothing but your own failed career and jealousy." "I'm accusing you," Marcus said quietly, "of lying to everyone in this room, of selling tickets to a live performance and then lip-syncing the one thing people came to hear." He looked out at the audience, at the faces watching this confrontation unfold. "And I'm accusing you of raising money for sick children while only giving them 12% of what you collect." That landed like a bomb. The whispers became shouts. People standing, demanding answers. The journalists in the press section typing frantically. Victoria's face had gone from red to white, bloodless. "That's a lie," she said, but her voice had no power behind it. "It's in the public financial disclosures," Marcus replied. "From last year's gala, 88% of the money raised went to administrative expenses. production costs, marketing. He gestured to the photos of sick children still displayed on the screen behind them, to Emma's face, 20 feet tall. Only 12% actually helped the children you're using to sell tickets. The crowd was turning. Marcus could feel it. Could see it in their faces, the doubt, the anger, the betrayal. Victoria looked around desperately. At her management team in the wings, at the cameras, at the audience that had loved her just 10 minutes ago and now looked at her like a stranger. She turned back to Marcus, her eyes cold, calculating, the mask dropping completely. "Fine," she said, her voice low and venomous. "You want to play this game? You think you're so much better than me?" She stepped back, gestured to the stage, to the microphone, to the spotlight. "Then you sing it, right now. No preparation, no warm-up, no second chance." Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "Let's see if the janitor can do what he claims I can't." Marcus's hands began to shake. This was it. The moment where he either proved everything he'd just said or became exactly what Victoria had always called him. A failure, a coward, someone who talked but couldn't deliver. From the audience, an old but steady voice called out, "You've got this, Marcus." Marcus turned. Raymond Thompson was standing in the back of the theater. Ray, who'd worked as a janitor at the Chicago theater for 32 years, who'd become like a father to Marcus over the past 5 years. Ray was clapping. Slow, steady, the sound echoing through the silent auditorium. "Sing the way you sing for Emma." Other people began to clap, scattered at first, then growing, spreading through the crowd like a wave building momentum. Marcus closed his eyes, took a deep breath, felt the air fill his lungs, felt his diaphragm expand, felt every lesson, every hour of practice, every sacrifice settling into his bones. He opened his eyes and looked at Victoria Sterling. "Play Breaking Point," he said to the conductor. No backing track. The orchestra raised their instruments, and Marcus began to sing. The silence that followed Victoria's challenge was absolute. 2,000 people held their breath. 3 million viewers watched through screens, fingers hovering over keyboards ready to capture whatever happened next. Marcus stood center stage, the microphone heavy in his hand. His heart was hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. 5 years of silence, 5 years of shame, 5 years of being told he'd thrown away his one chance. All of it came down to this moment. Victoria watched him with predatory patience, waiting for him to fail, to crack under pressure the same way he'd cracked 5 years ago when he'd chosen his dying wife over his career. She thought she knew how this would end. The conductor raised his baton. The orchestra prepared to play. Then a voice rang out from the wings, clear, firm, cutting through the tension like a blade. Actually, he's right. Every head in the theater turned. A man stepped out of the shadows backstage. Mid-30s, thin, wearing a black shirt with the theater's production company logo, a headset around his neck. Marcus recognized him immediately. Daniel Cross, Victoria's sound engineer for the past 7 years. The man who'd been running the soundboard during rehearsal. The one who'd turned up the backing track when Victoria couldn't hit the note. Victoria's face went rigid. "Daniel, this is not the time. I've been Victoria's sound engineer for 7 years. Daniel said, walking toward the center of the stage. His voice was quiet but steady, amplified by the stage microphones. "I've worked every tour, every televised performance, every gala." He stopped a few feet from Victoria, looked at her directly. "And he's absolutely right. You can't sing that note. You never could." The theater erupted. Gasps, shouts, the sound of a crowd collectively losing its composure. Victoria lunged toward Daniel. "You're fired. Do you hear me?" You're done. I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." "I know," Daniel said simply. He didn't flinch, didn't step back. "I've known that since I walked out here." He turned to face the audience. "At every single live performance over the past 7 years, I played a pre-recorded backing track during Breaking Point. The vocal track is Sienna Rose, a session singer from Austin. She recorded it once in a studio 18 years ago. That recording has been used at every concert, every TV appearance, every performance where Victoria claimed to be singing live." Daniel's voice was gaining strength. The voice of someone who'd been carrying a secret for too long and finally found the courage to put it down. The track is mixed into the orchestration so seamlessly that most people can't tell the difference. It's timed perfectly, matches Victoria's mouth movements, sounds like it could be her voice with enough reverb and processing. He pulled a USB drive from his pocket, held it up. "I have the original files, the session notes, emails from Victoria's management team with explicit instructions on how to layer the recording. Timestamps proving the vocal was recorded in 2007, 6 months before Victoria's debut album was released." Victoria's face had gone from white to gray. She looked like she might be sick. "This is theft of proprietary materials," she managed. Her voice shook. "Breach of contract, industrial espionage." "It's evidence," Daniel replied calmly, "of fraud, of misleading ticket buyers, of a career built on a lie." He looked at Marcus. "This man lost everything 5 years ago because you decided to make him an example. You destroyed his reputation, made him unemployable, turned him into a cautionary tale about what happens when you don't show proper gratitude." Daniel's voice hardened. "But you've been lying to everyone for 18 years, and I've been helping you do it because I was too afraid to lose my job, too afraid to speak up." He paused, took a breath. "But watching you drag a single father onto this stage to humiliate him in front of millions of people, watching you use his sick daughter's photo to raise money you'll never actually give to the hospital." Daniel shook his head. "I can't do it anymore. I won't." The audience was on its feet now, half of them shouting questions, the other half recording everything on their phones. The live stream chat was moving so fast it was unreadable. From the VIP section near the front, another figure stood. Nathan Reed. Marcus recognized him from the credits on a dozen platinum albums. Producer, mixer, one of the most respected audio engineers in the industry. "I can corroborate everything Daniel just said," Nathan announced. His voice carried the weight of 35 years in the music business. "I was the mixing engineer on Victoria's debut album. I was in the studio when Sienna Rose recorded that vocal." He walked toward the stage. Security moved to stop him, but he waved them off. Victoria's label wanted a signature moment, something that would set her apart from every other pop singer trying to make it. They hired Sienna to record the highest note she could sustain, D6 in the whistle register, 5 seconds of pure crystalline tone. Nathan climbed the stairs to the stage, stood beside Daniel. The label paid Sienna $2,500 and made her sign a non-disclosure agreement. Her name appears in the album credits as additional vocals, which is industry code for "we used her voice but don't want to explain how much." He looked directly at Victoria. "I stayed silent because that's what we do in this business. Protect the star, protect the money, protect the illusion." His voice dropped. "But I've spent 3 decades watching talented people get chewed up and spit out by this industry. And I'm done watching it happen to people who actually deserve success while frauds get rich." Victoria was shaking. With rage or fear, Marcus couldn't tell. Probably both. "This is character assassination," she said, her voice rising. "Coordinated, planned. You're all conspiring to destroy me." "We're telling the truth," Daniel said flatly. You have no proof, Victoria shot back. A USB drive could contain anything, false evidence, doctored files. This is a setup. Then explain the rehearsal today, Marcus said quietly. All eyes turned back to him. Explain why you cracked on the exact same note during sound check. Why you immediately asked for the backing track to be turned up. Why your voice suddenly became perfect the moment the recording was playing. My throat was dry, Victoria insisted, but the explanation sounded hollow now. Desperate. Your throat was fine, Marcus replied. Your technique was solid. Your breathing was controlled. Everything about your singing was professional and competent right up until you had to reach past A5. He stepped closer to her. You're a good singer, Victoria. Better than good. You could have had a successful career on your actual talent, but it wasn't enough for you. You needed to be exceptional, needed that moment that would make you unforgettable. His voice wasn't angry. It was almost sad. So you stole someone else's voice and built your empire on it. Victoria's hands were clenched into fists at her sides. Her perfectly styled hair was starting to come loose, makeup cracking at the edges. You think you're some kind of hero, she hissed. Standing up for the little people, you're a janitor, Marcus. A nobody. You threw away your one shot at success, and now you're trying to drag me down to your level out of pure jealousy. I'm not trying to drag you down, Marcus said. I'm trying to stop you from using sick children to fund your fraud. He gestured to the screen behind them, to Emma's face, to the faces of dozens of other children fighting for their lives. 88% of the money you raise at these galas goes to your management company, to production costs, to marketing your brand. Only 12% actually reaches the hospital. Victoria's mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. That's public record, Marcus continued. Financial disclosures from last year's event, available to anyone who cares to look. He looked out at the audience, at the phones recording, at the cameras broadcasting this moment to millions. 2,000 people paid $500 tonight. $1 million in ticket sales. If the pattern holds, only 120,000 will actually help these children. The crowd's energy had shifted completely. The initial shock was hardening into anger. People were pulling up their phones, searching, finding the financial disclosures Marcus had mentioned, confirming that everything he'd said was true. Victoria looked around wildly, at her management team huddled in the wings, at the exits blocked by curious audience members, at the cameras still recording every second of her unraveling. She had nowhere to go, no way to spin this, no prepared statement that could repair what was happening in real time. So she did the only thing she had left. She attacked. You want proof, she said, her voice sharp and vicious. You want to expose me as a fraud, fine. Then you sing it, right now. Prove you're better than me. She stepped back, gestured to the stage like she was granting permission. No warm-up, no preparation, no excuses. You sing Breaking Point and hit that D6 perfectly and I'll admit to everything. I'll donate every penny from tonight to the hospital. I'll issue a public apology. Her smile was cruel. But when you fail, when you crack and choke and prove you're just another washed-up has-been who couldn't handle the pressure 5 years ago and can't handle it now, you'll get down on your knees in front of everyone here and apologize for slandering me. She leaned close. Her voice dropped to a whisper that the microphones barely caught. And you'll sign a statement saying you made everything up, that you're a liar desperate for attention, that I'm the real victim here. Marcus looked at her, at the desperation masked as confidence, at the fear driving her to make threats she probably couldn't enforce. He thought about Emma, about Ray, about every person who'd ever been silenced by someone with more power and better lawyers. He thought about Sarah, about the choice he'd made 5 years ago, the choice Victoria had used to destroy him. Then he turned to the conductor. "Play the song," he said. His voice was steady, clear, certain. No backing track, just the orchestra and my voice. The conductor looked to the stage manager. The stage manager looked to the production team. Everyone looked at each other trying to figure out who was actually in charge of this disaster. Finally, the conductor nodded. The orchestra raised their instruments, and Marcus Hayes prepared to do what he hadn't done in 5 years. To sing. Not for fame. Not for redemption. Not even to prove Victoria wrong. To sing because it was the only thing he'd ever been truly good at. And because his daughter was watching. And because the truth deserved a voice. The opening notes of Breaking Point filled the Chicago theater. And Marcus began. Marcus closed his eyes. The noise of the theater faded. 2,000 people. 3 million watching online. Victoria's hatred. Daniel's courage. The cameras. The lights. All of it dissolved into silence. He breathed. In through his nose. Deep. Letting the air fill his lungs completely. Expanding his diaphragm. His ribs. His back. The way he'd been taught 15 years ago by a voice teacher who'd believed in him before anyone else did. Out through his mouth. Slow. Controlled. Releasing tension from his shoulders, his jaw, his throat, in again, feeling his body remember. Muscle memory from thousands of hours of practice. From performances in church basements and community theaters. From the stage at the Civic Opera House 5 years ago when he'd sung for 42 million people and felt like he was flying. He opened his eyes. The conductor was watching him, baton raised, waiting for Marcus's signal. Marcus nodded. The orchestra began. The opening measures of Breaking Point were deceptively simple. A solo violin carrying the melody. Piano adding sparse haunting chords underneath. Building slowly, drawing the listener in. Marcus waited, counting measures in his head, feeling the song's architecture, understanding its bones. He'd heard this song hundreds of times, had analyzed it, broken it down note by note. Studied Victoria's performances, or what he'd thought were Victoria's performances, trying to understand how she made it sound so effortless. Now he knew the truth. She'd never made it sound effortless. She'd never made it sound like anything. Someone else had done that for her. The violin faded. The piano shifted into the accompaniment pattern. The song's foundation. Marcus lifted the microphone and began to sing. His voice entered quietly, almost hesitant. The opening lines sat low in his range. Comfortable. Safe. He focused on the lyrics. On the story the song was telling. About reaching for something impossible. About pushing past limits. About the moment when you either break or break through. The irony wasn't lost on him. A few people in the audience shifted. Whispered. He sounded good. Solid. Well-trained. But nothing extraordinary. Nothing that justified the drama of the past 20 minutes. Marcus could feel their doubt, could feel Victoria's smug certainty radiating from where she stood in the wings. She thought he would fail, thought 5 years of silence had eroded whatever talent he'd once possessed. She was about to learn otherwise. The song moved into the second verse. The melody climbed slightly, more demanding, requiring better breath control, more precise pitch. Marcus's voice followed without effort. Each note placed exactly where it needed to be. His years of training evident in every phrase, every breath placed strategically, every vowel shaped to maximize resonance. But he wasn't just singing correctly. He was singing truthfully. There was something raw in his voice, something Victoria's polished performances had always lacked. He wasn't performing, he was testifying, pouring 5 years of grief and struggle and unspoken love into every word. The audience began to lean forward, to really listen. The pre-chorus arrived. This was where the song started revealing its challenges, where the melody began its climb toward the impossible. Marcus opened his voice. Let the power increase without losing control. His sound filled the theater naturally. No strain, no effort, just pure resonance born from proper technique and deep emotional connection. The theater's acoustics were perfect. Every note rang clear, traveled to the back row without amplification. The microphone was almost unnecessary. A few people in the front rows sat straighter. Musicians, vocal coaches, people who understood what they were hearing, what it took to produce sound like that. D5, E5, F5. Marcus's voice climbed, effortless, light, each note a step higher with no sign of the struggle Victoria had shown. In the wings, Victoria's face had gone pale. She was watching Marcus like someone watching their own execution. The bridge approached. This was it, the place where the song transformed from impressive to legendary, where the melody climbed into a register that separated competent singers from exceptional ones. The orchestra swelled, strings and brass adding layers of complexity, building tension, preparing for the climax. Marcus didn't hesitate. G5. His voice transitioned from chest voice to head voice. The shift was seamless, invisible, like water flowing from one stream into another. No break, no register crack, just smooth continuous sound. A5. Still climbing, still effortless. His face calm, serene, like he was walking through familiar territory, like these notes were home. B5. The audience was completely silent now. Even the people who'd been whispering had stopped. Every eye fixed on the man in the janitor's uniform standing center stage doing something they'd been told was impossible. Then Marcus reached for the note that had defined Victoria Sterling's career. D6. The sound that emerged from his throat was crystalline, pure. No effects, no studio tricks, no backing track, just a human voice reaching into the whistle register and pulling down a note that rang like a bell cast from perfect metal. He held it. 1 second, 2, 3, 4, 5. The note sustained. Unwavering, perfectly in tune, perfectly controlled, perfectly impossible. Someone in the front row gasped, actually gasped. The sound caught on the theater microphones. But Marcus wasn't finished. He pushed higher. E6. The audience's collective intake of breath was audible. This was beyond breaking point, beyond the song as it was written, into territory that most professional singers never touched. F6. Victoria's backing track had never attempted this, never dared. This was Marcus proving that he could go where she'd never even tried to fake. G6. His voice was completely open now. No hiding, no fear, no memory of 5 years of silence. Just pure vocal ability unleashed for the first time since the night he'd run from the Civic Opera House to hold his dying wife's hand. The note hung in the air like a physical thing, like something you could reach out and touch. Then Marcus brought it back down. G6 to D6, a controlled descent that was almost harder than the climb, requiring perfect breath management, perfect control. D6 to A5, each transition invisible, seamless, A5 to F5, the melody resolving, coming home. He moved into the final chorus, his voice now fully opened, no longer tentative, no longer careful, just powerful and honest and completely undeniably real. The orchestra followed him, the conductor's baton moving with Marcus's phrasing. letting the singer lead instead of trying to contain him. When the final word faded into silence, Marcus lowered the microphone. No one moved. For 3 full seconds, the Chicago theater was completely silent. Then it exploded. 2,000 people leapt to their feet. The sound of their applause like thunder, like a physical force hitting the stage. People were shouting, crying, some of them openly weeping. The musicians in the orchestra were standing, clapping. The conductor had set down his baton to applaud with both hands. Ray was jumping up and down in the back of the theater, both arms raised, tears streaming down his face. Other janitors, ushers, theater staff who'd worked alongside Marcus for 5 years. All of them standing, applauding, celebrating. The live stream had frozen. Too many people trying to share the moment simultaneously. Servers overloaded. Within 30 seconds, 50,000 shares. Within a minute, 200,000. The name Marcus Hayes shot to #1 on every social media platform simultaneously, trending worldwide in under 90 seconds. Marcus stood center stage, breathing hard, barely able to process what had just happened, what he'd just done. 5 years of silence. 5 years of being told he'd wasted his gift. 5 years of believing in his darkest moments that maybe they were right. All of it answered in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. From the front row, a woman stood, Natasha Cole. Marcus recognized her immediately. R&B legend, 15 Grammy Awards, vocal coach to some of the biggest names in music, a special guest at tonight's gala. She was crying. That, she said, her voice breaking, amplified by the theater's microphones, is the best thing I've ever heard from anyone in my entire career. She looked directly at Marcus. Not just from a janitor, from anyone, ever. The applause grew louder, impossible as that seemed. Another figure stood. Nathan Reed, the producer who'd already exposed Victoria's fraud. I need to say something, he announced. The crowd quieted slightly. I've been in this industry for 35 years. I've worked with Alicia Keys, Kendrick Lamar, Beyoncé. I've heard the best voices in the world. He shook his head slowly. And what we just witnessed. A janitor hitting notes that the woman who made them famous can't even approach. He turned to look at Victoria, still frozen in the wings. This is what actual talent looks like. This is what you've been faking for 18 years. The theater erupted again. Journalists typing frantically, cameras abandoning their fixed positions, rushing toward the stage to capture Marcus's face, his reaction, this moment. Victoria finally found her voice. This is insane, she screamed. The microphones caught every word, broadcast it to millions. You're going to destroy my career over this. Everyone uses backing tracks. Everyone. But they don't claim to be singing live, Natasha shot back immediately. They don't sell tickets promising an authentic performance and then lip sync. That's fraud, Victoria. I didn't lip sync, Victoria insisted. Her voice was shrill now, desperate. I sang. You all heard me sing. We heard you fail, someone called from the audience. Victoria's face contorted, the mask of composure completely gone, nothing left but raw panic and rage. She turned to Marcus, took a step toward him. The security guards moved closer, uncertain whether to intervene. You'll regret this, Victoria said, her voice low, vicious. But the stage microphones picked it up anyway, broadcast it everywhere. You, your sick daughter, your pathetic little life, I will destroy all of it. I promise you. You'll never work again, never sing again. I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are. The threat hung in the air. Recorded by every camera, every phone, 3 million witnesses. But Marcus wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time in 5 years, he felt completely free. "I don't work in this industry," he said quietly. "I sing because I love it, because it's the only thing I have left of my wife, the only thing I can give my daughter that money can't buy." He paused, looked at Victoria directly. "And you can't take that from me. No matter what you do, no matter what you threaten, you can't take what I actually am." He took a breath. "But maybe it's time someone took from you what you never really had." The theater fell silent again. Waiting. A single person began to clap, slow, deliberate, then another. Within seconds, all 2,000 people were standing again, applauding not just for the performance, but for a man who'd refused to be silenced, who'd chosen truth over safety, who'd risked everything because it was right. Victoria looked around at the faces that had adored her 20 minutes ago, that had paid $500 to be in her presence, that had believed every word she'd said. Now those same faces looked at her with something between pity and disgust. She turned and walked off the stage. No final statement, no defense, no attempt to salvage what was clearly unsalvageable. Just a woman whose empire had been built on sand walking away as it crumbled beneath her feet. The moment Victoria's foot crossed into the wings, the theater erupted again. People glued to their phones. The live-stream chat moving so fast it was unreadable. Marcus remained standing center stage, surrounded by chaos he'd caused simply by telling the truth. He didn't feel proud, didn't feel victorious, just a quiet certainty that he'd done the right thing, even if he had no idea what would come next. The chaos lasted nearly 40 minutes before security finally cleared the auditorium. Marcus sat backstage on a folding chair. Ray sat beside him, refusing to leave. Around them, adults whispered urgently. Event organizers, Victoria's management team, people in expensive suits speaking rapidly into phones, damage control in real time. No one spoke to Marcus. He was simultaneously the center of everything and completely invisible, the eye of a hurricane that was about to destroy careers, reputations, fortunes. His phone had been vibrating nonstop. Unknown numbers, messages flooding in faster than he could read them. He turned it off, put it in his pocket. Emma, he needed to call Emma. The hospital night nurse would have put her to bed by now, would have let her watch the live stream on the iPad they kept charged beside her bed for moments when the pain got bad, and distraction was the only medicine that worked. His 6-year-old daughter had just watched her father expose a celebrity in front of millions of people. Marcus pulled his phone back out, turned it on, ignored the flood of notifications and called the hospital. The nurse answered on the second ring. "Mr. Hayes?" "Emma's fine. She watched. She's so proud of you." Marcus's throat tightened. "Can I talk to her?" "She just fell asleep, finally. She was too excited to settle down. Kept saying, 'My daddy's voice is magic.'" Marcus closed his eyes, felt tears trying to come, pushed them back down. "Tell her I love her. Tell her I'll be there first thing in the morning." "I will. And Mr. Hayes." That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. The call ended. Marcus sat holding the phone, staring at nothing. "You okay?" Ray asked quietly. "I don't know." It was the most honest answer Marcus had. The backstage area was finally starting to empty. The gala was over, canceled, refunds would be issued, lawyers were already being called. This night would generate lawsuits that would take years to resolve. Marcus stood, his legs shaky, adrenaline wearing off, exhaustion replacing it. "I should go home." "I'll walk you out," Ray said. They made it halfway down the backstage hallway before she appeared. Olivia Grant, mid-50s, severe gray suit that probably cost $3,000. Leather briefcase. The kind of lawyer who billed by the minute and made partners nervous. "Mr. Hayes," she said, stepping directly into his path. "I'm Olivia Grant. I represent Miss Sterling." Ray moved closer to Marcus. A subtle shift. Protective. "He doesn't have a lawyer present," Ray said. Calm but firm. "If this is a legal discussion, I suggest representation." "Of course," Olivia replied smoothly. "I'm not here for formal negotiations. Just to resolve an unfortunate misunderstanding before it becomes something more complicated." "There's no misunderstanding," Marcus said. His voice was quiet, tired. "Your client can't sing the notes that made her famous. That's fraud." Olivia's expression didn't change. Professional neutrality perfected over decades of practice. "The music industry is complex, Mr. Hayes. Artists use vocal support, backing tracks, studio techniques. That's standard practice across the industry." "I understand," Marcus said. "She lied." Olivia studied him for a moment, recalculating, adjusting her approach. "Miss Sterling's sponsors are threatening to withdraw. Her tour is in jeopardy. We're looking at millions of dollars in potential damages. Her career could be permanently destroyed." She let that sit between them. The weight of potential ruin. All because of a misunderstanding about industry standards. "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Marcus said. "It was the truth." Olivia opened her briefcase, removed a stack of documents, set them on a nearby equipment case. "If you sign this, everything goes away." Marcus picked up the papers, read. His expression didn't change. He'd read enough contracts in his music career, brief as it was, to know when he was being led into a trap. The document said Marcus had made false accusations, that he'd been seeking attention, that he apologized for any harm caused to Miss Sterling's reputation. "It's a mutual agreement," Olivia said. "In return, Miss Sterling won't pursue legal action against you, and as a gesture of goodwill, she'll fund a $120,000 music scholarship in your name. Full coverage for any program you choose." She paused, let that number hang in the air. "We're also aware your daughter needs surgery. We're prepared to cover the full $92,000, all medical expenses, immediate surgery, the best cardiac surgeons in the country." Marcus set the papers down carefully. $212,000. Enough to save Emma's life. Enough to change everything. "And if I don't sign," Olivia's smile faded slightly, "Miss Sterling will pursue defamation charges against you, against Daniel Cross, against Nathan Reed, against anyone who spreads these accusations." She pulled out another document, a lawsuit already drafted, waiting only for signatures. "We'll also be forced to inform Emma's school district that a $750,000 donation to its music program is now in jeopardy due to your actions." Ray's hands clenched into fists, but he stayed silent. This was Marcus's decision. "So," Olivia concluded, her voice soft, almost kind. "You have a choice. Sign here, accept the scholarship, save your daughter, and everyone moves on." She looked at Marcus directly. "Or refuse and watch your family drown in legal fees you can't afford. Watch your daughter's surgery get delayed while we tie you up in court for years. Watch opportunities disappear for everyone who supported you tonight." Marcus stared at the papers, at the lines of text that would label him a liar, at the signature that would erase everything that had just happened. He thought about Emma, about $92,000, about surgery in 2 weeks or maybe never. He thought about the ICU nurses who'd become family, about the hospital bills stacking up on his kitchen table, about working 2 shifts every day and still falling further behind. Then he thought about the truth, about Victoria using sick children to fund her fraud, about talented singers having their voices stolen, about the lie that had destroyed his career and could destroy countless others. "No," Marcus said. Olivia blinked. "Excuse me. I'm not signing." His voice was steady, certain. "I didn't lie. She did. And I won't say I lied just because she's rich and I'm not." "Mr. Hayes," Olivia's voice turned cold. "I don't think you fully understand the consequences of what you're refusing." "I understand you're threatening me," Marcus said. "You're threatening my daughter. You're threatening everyone who told the truth tonight." He stood up, looked Olivia Grant directly in the eyes. "Go ahead and sue me. If that's what you need to do, do it, but I'm not signing that paper." Olivia's face hardened. The polite mask dropped completely. "By tomorrow morning, there will be stories about you, about your past, about your family, private things, painful things." She picked up her briefcase. "And when it gets worse, which it will remember that you chose this." She walked away, heels clicking on the concrete floor, the sound echoing in the empty hallway. Ray didn't speak immediately, didn't offer empty comfort. The two men just stood there in silence. Finally, Ray said quietly, "You sure?" Marcus nodded. "I'm sure. That scholarship, the surgery money, that could have changed everything." "I know," Marcus said. "But I won't teach Emma that truth can be bought with fear." He took a breath. "I chose family over career 5 years ago. People said I was wrong. But Sarah, even as she was dying, told me she was proud of me." His voice didn't shake. "For me, that's enough." Ray nodded, put a hand on Marcus's shoulder, the grip of one working man to another. No words needed. They walked out into the Chicago night together. Two men who'd chosen truth over money. The consequences would come. Marcus knew that. Olivia Grant wasn't making empty threats, but he'd sung tonight. Really sung. For the first time in 5 years. And nothing Victoria Sterling could do would take that away. The next morning arrived like a hammer. Marcus woke at 6 a.m. to his phone buzzing like an angry hornet's nest. He'd managed 3 hours of sleep. His body felt like he'd been in a car accident. The screen was flooded with notifications. Thousands of them. Messages, emails, calls from numbers he didn't recognize. He opened Twitter first. The top trending topic was a photo of his apartment building in Lincoln Park. The peeling paint, the broken security gate, overflowing dumpsters in the alley. Someone had found where he lived and posted it for the world to see. The caption read, "This is where Marcus Hayes lives while he accuses Victoria Sterling of fraud. Clearly just a desperate man trying to escape poverty through extortion." Marcus's hands went cold. The next post showed a photo from 5 years ago, Marcus accepting a free meal from a church food pantry the week after Sarah died, when he'd had no money for groceries because every dollar went to formula for Emma and NICU bills. Living off handouts his whole life, this was never about truth. It was about getting paid. The comments were vicious, ungrateful. He should be thanking Victoria for even acknowledging him. This is what happens when you give people like this a platform. People like this. Marcus set the phone down, his hands shaking. By noon, the smear campaign was in full force. News sites began publishing articles, all eerily similar, all citing sources close to the Hayes family, claiming Marcus had planned the entire incident, that it was a calculated extortion scheme. No evidence, no verification, just published as fact. By 2 p.m., Victoria's legal team officially filed the lawsuit. $12 million in damages, not just against Marcus, against Sienna Rose, the studio singer he'd named, against Nathan Reed, the producer who'd confirmed the fraud, against Daniel Cross, the sound engineer who'd exposed the backing track. against anyone who'd dared tell the truth. Marcus held the legal documents in his shaking hands, delivered to his apartment by a process server who'd looked embarrassed to be there. $12 million. This wasn't about winning. Victoria's team knew they'd probably lose in court. The evidence was overwhelming. Daniel had the files. Nathan had the session notes. Sienna could testify, but they didn't need to win. They just needed to make the cost of fighting unbearable. Legal fees alone would bankrupt everyone involved long before the case went to trial. That was the weapon, and they were wielding it with surgical precision. But Victoria's team wasn't finished. By 4 p.m., new stories began appearing, more coordinated, more damaging. Sources close to Victoria Sterling claim Marcus Hayes has a history of alcohol abuse, that he's an unfit father, that Child Protective Services have been called multiple times. None of it was true. Another outlet. Hospital records suggest Emma Hayes may not actually have a severe heart condition. Family accused of exaggerating diagnosis for sympathy and donations. Marcus read that one 3 times. Felt something break inside his chest. They were attacking his daughter, his sick 6-year-old daughter, calling her condition fake, suggesting he was using her for money. He sat on the old couch in their apartment, phone trembling in his hand, watching lies pile on top of lies like mud. The walls were closing in. Then at 7:15 that evening, something changed. A woman named Sienna Rose posted a video. She appeared to be late 30s, blonde hair pulled back, sitting in a professional recording studio, gold records on the wall behind her, the markers of a successful career most people had never heard about. "My name is Sienna Rose," she said, speaking directly to the camera. "I'm a studio singer, and I am the voice Victoria Sterling has been selling as her own for 18 years. Marcus's heart pounded. "That man told the truth last night. I sang the whistle register note in Breaking Point. I sang it in 7 other songs on Victoria's albums. I was paid $2,500 per song and forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement." She held up a stack of papers. "This is my contract. This is proof. And I stayed silent while a janitor was being destroyed for exposing something I was too afraid to say myself." The video had been posted 8 minutes ago. Already had 75,000 views. Within 1 hour, it hit 3 million. Within 3 hours, 7 other studio singers came forward, each with their own contracts, their own recordings, their own stories of being paid to sing for artists who couldn't hit the notes themselves, each confirming that Marcus Hayes had told the truth. By midnight, public opinion had completely reversed. Victoria Sterling Exposed shot to the top of trending. Not on speculation this time. On evidence. On proof. On the testimony of people who'd been there, who'd done the work, who finally found the courage to speak. Marcus sat on his couch watching the internet tear apart the woman who'd tried to destroy him. And for the first time since the gala, he realized something important. He wasn't alone anymore. The momentum shift was real, but it didn't make the lawsuits disappear. Marcus woke the next morning to find the $12 million complaint still sitting on his kitchen table. Public opinion might have turned, but Victoria Sterling's lawyers didn't care about Twitter trends. They cared about leverage. And they still had plenty. His phone rang at 8 a.m. Unknown number, he almost didn't answer. "Mr. Hayes, this is Rebecca Torres. I'm an attorney with Morrison & Chen. I'd like to represent you, pro bono." Marcus sat up straighter. "Why?" "Because what you did was right," Rebecca said simply. "And because my firm believes the legal system shouldn't be weaponized by the wealthy to silence people telling the truth." Her voice was direct. No false comfort, no grandiose promises. "But I need you to understand what you're facing. Victoria has resources. Time. She can drag this out for years, exhaust you financially and emotionally. Even if we win, the process will be brutal. Can we win? Marcus asked. Rebecca didn't hesitate. Yes. Legally, we have an extremely strong case. Everything you said was true. Everything she's claiming as defamation requires you to have made false statements. We have witnesses, documentation, her own sound engineer on record. She paused. But winning and surviving the fight are different things. I need to know you're prepared for what's coming. Marcus thought about Emma, about the surgery she needed in less than 2 weeks, about the $92,000 he didn't have, about the $212,000 he'd turned down last night. I'm prepared, he said. Then let's get to work. Within an hour, Rebecca was sitting at Marcus's kitchen table. Ray had come over, brought coffee and bagels nobody touched. The small apartment felt even smaller with the corporate attorney reviewing documents on the worn Formica counter. Rebecca worked fast, efficiently, laying out the legal landscape like a battlefield map. Victoria's lawsuit is garbage, she said bluntly. Defamation requires false statements. Everything you said was demonstrably true. The court will dismiss it. So, why file it? Marcus asked. Intimidation, Rebecca replied. Even a frivolous lawsuit costs money to defend. Most people can't afford to fight. They settle, sign the NDA, disappear. She looked at Marcus directly. But we're not going to settle. We're going to countersue. She pulled up documents on her laptop, started typing. Fraud, false advertising, breach of contract with ticket buyers, consumer protection violations. We're going to turn this into a class action, make it so expensive for her to continue that she can't. Ray leaned forward. How expensive? If we can certify a class of everyone who bought tickets to her concerts over the past 5 years believing they were seeing a live performance, we're talking hundreds of millions in potential damages. Marcus's head spun. I just wanted her to stop lying. And we're going to make sure she does, Rebecca said. But first we survive her counterattack. The counterattack came faster than expected. At 4 a.m., 2 days later, Marcus's phone rang. The hospital. His heart stopped before his brain caught up. Mr. Hayes, you need to come now. Emma's in distress. Marcus was out the door in 30 seconds, still wearing the t-shirt he'd slept in. No jacket despite the November cold. He ran the 6 blocks to Northwestern Memorial because waiting for a cab felt impossible. Emma was unconscious when he arrived. Machines everywhere. Doctors and nurses moving with controlled urgency. The kind of calm that meant panic underneath. Dr. Walsh pulled Marcus aside, his face grave. Her condition has deteriorated significantly. The ventricular septal defect is larger than our last scan showed. Her heart is failing. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. We need to operate sooner. Within the week, maybe less. But the insurance, the approval process takes weeks. We're working on emergency authorization, Walsh said carefully. But you need to understand. Open heart surgery, 9 hours. Even in the best circumstances, there's an 18% risk of complications. He paused. Without surgery, Emma won't live to see her 10th birthday, possibly not her 7th. Marcus couldn't breathe. The hallway tilted. Can I see her? She's sedated. But yes. Emma looked so small in the hospital bed. Tubes and wires connecting her to machines that beeped and hummed. Her dark hair spread across the pillow, face pale, lips slightly blue. Marcus took her hand. It was cold. He wanted to sing to her, their song. You are my sunshine, but his throat had closed. No sound would come. A nurse touched his shoulder gently. Her heart rate stabilizes when you're here. We've been tracking it. Your presence helps. Marcus nodded. Couldn't speak. He stayed there for 3 hours, holding Emma's hand, watching her breathe, thinking about Olivia Grant's offer. The $92,000 he'd refused. The money that could save his daughter's life. At 3 a.m., sitting alone in the ICU waiting room after they'd made him leave Emma's bedside, Marcus pulled out his phone. Olivia Grant's number was still in his call history. His finger hovered over it. One call, accept the deal, sign the papers, save Emma. The waiting room door opened softly. Ray walked in. Must have gotten Marcus's text about the hospital. Sat down beside him without speaking. After a long silence, Ray said quietly, "You thinking about calling her?" Marcus nodded. "Would Sarah want you to?" The question hit harder than Marcus expected. He thought about his wife, about her final days, about the choice he'd made 5 years ago that everyone said was wrong. Sarah, even dying, had told him she was proud, that he'd chosen love over ambition, that he'd shown Emma what really mattered. "No," Marcus said finally. "She wouldn't." He deleted Olivia's number from his phone. Ray nodded, said nothing. Just sat there. Solidarity that meant more than words. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following week. Davidson County Superior Courtroom 6B, smaller than Marcus expected. About 50 people in the gallery, mostly journalists and supporters who'd been lining up since dawn. Victoria Sterling sat at the plaintiff's table with 6 attorneys in expensive suits. She wore a navy jacket. Hair perfect. Face composed in an expression of wounded dignity. The familiar look of a celebrity unfairly attacked. Marcus sat at the defense table between Rebecca Torres and Ray. He wore the only white dress shirt he owned, borrowed tie from Ray, looking like what he was, a working man out of his depth. This wasn't the full trial, just a preliminary hearing on Victoria's request for an injunction, a gag order that would prevent Marcus Sienna Rose Daniel Cross and Nathan Reed from making any further statements about Victoria's use of backing tracks. Judge Linda Morrison entered, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and 25 years on the bench. She looked at Victoria's legal team, then at Marcus. Something flickered across her face, quick but deliberate. "Miss Grant," the judge said to Olivia, "you're seeking a gag order against a janitor. Your Honor, the defendant's occupation doesn't diminish the harm caused by his false statements." "Are they false?" Judge Morrison cut in. Olivia hesitated. "Those statements were made with malicious intent to destroy my client's reputation and livelihood." "That wasn't my question," the judge said calmly. "Are the statements factually false, yes or no?" Rebecca stood. "If the court permits, we'd like to present video evidence from the gala, unedited." Judge Morrison nodded. The courtroom watched in silence. They saw Victoria drag Marcus onto the stage, heard the whispered "fail quietly" broadcast through the open microphone, watched Victoria attempt to sing without the backing track and crack on the high note. When the video ended, the courtroom was absolutely silent. "Your Honor," Rebecca continued, "the plaintiff didn't summon this man because he lied. She summoned him to humiliate him, and when he told the truth when he exposed fraud that's been occurring for 18 years, she responded by trying to destroy him." She pulled out documents, financial disclosures from previous galas. "This isn't defamation. This is consequence." Judge Morrison turned to Olivia. "Do you have any evidence that Mr. Hayes' statements are factually false? Your Honor, the music industry routinely uses vocal support and enhancement techniques. The context of my client's performance has been misunderstood." "I didn't ask about industry practice," Judge Morrison said. "I asked for evidence that what he said was false. Do you have any?" Olivia's jaw tightened. We believe the defendant's characterization of events was misleading and harmful. So, that's a no. The judge made a note. Miss Torres, do you have evidence supporting Mr. Hayes's statements? Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to call Sienna Rose to the stand. Sienna walked to the witness box, was sworn in. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. Rebecca guided her through the testimony, the contracts, the NDAs, the recordings proving Sienna's voice was used on Victoria's albums, the emails explicitly instructing that Sienna never be properly credited. Miss Rose, Rebecca asked, when you heard Marcus Hayes say that Victoria Sterling couldn't sing that note, what did you think? I thought finally, Sienna answered. Finally someone said it. And was he right? Yes, completely. Olivia stood to cross-examine, but Judge Morrison raised her hand. I've heard enough. She turned to Victoria Sterling directly. Miss Sterling, I'm going to ask you one question. You're not currently under oath on the witness stand, but you are an officer of this court by virtue of filing this lawsuit, and I expect truthful answers. The courtroom held its breath. Can you sing the note at issue? Victoria's face went pale. Your Honor. I failed to see how this is relevant to the legal question of whether highly relevant, Judge Morrison interrupted. You're asking this court to silence people who say you cannot reach that note. If you can demonstrate it, sing it now. The silence was deafening. Victoria looked at her lawyers, looked at the judge, looked at Marcus. My voice hasn't been properly warmed up. It would be unfair to expect. You've performed on demand for 18 years, the judge said evenly. Surely you can demonstrate your signature note once in a courtroom. Victoria's mouth opened, closed. Not a single sound emerged. Judge Morrison picked up her gavel. Just as I thought. The gavel came down. The request for an injunction is denied. Furthermore, the court sanctions the plaintiff for filing a frivolous action intended to silence truthful speech. Another strike of the gavel. Mr. Hayes, you are free to continue telling your story. That's called the First Amendment. It protects truth even when truth is inconvenient for the powerful. The courtroom erupted. Journalists typing frantically. Supporters cheering. Camera operators scrambling for position. Victoria sat frozen at her table. Her attorneys huddled around her whispering urgently. Outside the courthouse, Rachel Bennett from 60 Minutes was waiting with the camera crew. Marcus, how do you feel? I feel like I can finally breathe. That evening, the interview aired. 18 million people watched. During the closing credits, Victoria's last remaining sponsors withdrew. Her record label announced they were terminating her contract. The Las Vegas residency she'd been planning was canceled. The Grammy committee released a statement saying they were reviewing her awards. A career built on stolen voices and protected lies officially began its collapse. But Marcus's greatest victory didn't happen in the courtroom. It came 3 days later when his phone rang at 6 in the morning. Mr. Hayes, this is the office of Alicia Keys. Ms. Keys would like to cover the full medical costs for your daughter's surgery, all $92,000. Marcus sat straight up in bed, couldn't speak. Tears came before words. We've been following your story. The voice continued. What you did took incredible courage. Ms. Keys wants to help however she can. But that was only the beginning. Within 24 hours, John Legend called. Offered to cover all of Emma's post-surgery recovery expenses. Kelly Clarkson tweeted a link to a GoFundMe for the Hayes family. $320,000 raised in 8 hours. Emma's school held an emergency meeting. Voted unanimously to publicly support Marcus. They rejected Victoria's threatened donation entirely. Strangers sent cards, flowers, messages of support to the hospital. The Chicago Theater's staff took up a collection. Every janitor, every usher, every sound technician contributed. They raised $14,000 in 3 days. And on a cold November morning, 1 week after the preliminary hearing, Dr. Walsh called Marcus into his office. "We have full funding for Emma's surgery," he said, smiling. "Between the donations and the emergency insurance approval, everything is covered. We can operate tomorrow if you're ready." Marcus wasn't ready. How could anyone be ready to watch their child go into 9 hours of open heart surgery? But Emma needed this. And finally, for the first time in 5 years, Marcus could give it to her. "We're ready," he said. The morning of Emma's surgery arrived with terrible clarity. Marcus sat beside her hospital bed at 5 a.m. The pre-op team had already been in, started the IV, given her the medication that would make her drowsy. Her small hand gripped his with surprising strength. "Daddy, I'm scared." Marcus's throat closed. He swallowed hard. "I'm scared too, sweetheart." Emma looked at him with those dark eyes, Sarah's eyes. "But you sang anyway, even when you were scared, at the theater." Marcus managed a smile. "That's different." "No, it's not," Emma said. Her voice was getting softer, the medication working. "Being brave means you're scared, but you still do the right thing. Mom told me that." She had. Sarah had said those exact words, lying in a hospital bed just like this one, holding Marcus's hand while her life drained away. "Will you sing for me, Daddy, our song?" Marcus's vision blurred, but he sang. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." His voice cracked on the second line. He kept going. "You make me happy when skies are gray." The nurses preparing to wheel Emma to surgery stopped, listened. "You'll never know, dear, how much I love you." Emma's eyes were closing, the sedation pulling her under. "Please don't take my sunshine away." They wheeled her toward the operating room. Marcus walked alongside the gurney as far as he was allowed, singing until the double doors closed between them. Then he collapsed into a chair in the surgical waiting room. Ray was already there. Had been since 4 a.m. He didn't speak, just handed Marcus a cup of coffee that Marcus didn't drink. 9 hours. Dr. Walsh had said the surgery would take 9 hours, maybe 10 if there were complications. Marcus watched the clock. The first hour passed like years, every minute a small eternity. By hour 3, Ray had convinced him to eat something, a sandwich from the cafeteria that tasted like cardboard. Marcus forced it down anyway. Hour 5. A nurse came out with an update. "Everything is proceeding as expected. Dr. Walsh will give you a full report when we're finished." Hour 7. Marcus had memorized every tile on the waiting room floor, counted them twice. Anything to keep his mind from imagining what was happening behind those doors. Hour 8. He dozed, dreamed of Sarah, woke with tears on his face. At hour 9 and 43 minutes, the operating room doors opened. Dr. Walsh walked out, mask pulled down, face exhausted but smiling. The surgery was successful. Marcus's legs gave out. Ray caught him, held him up while he sobbed. "Her heart is repaired," Walsh continued. "The defect is closed. Her oxygen levels are already improving. She came through beautifully." Marcus couldn't speak, could only nod and cry and try to remember how to breathe. 3 hours later, Emma woke in recovery. Marcus was sitting beside her, holding her hand. Had been since they'd let him into the room. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." "Did you sing?" "Not yet. Do you want to hear it?" Emma nodded, so Marcus sang. Right there in the recovery room, with machines beeping and nurses moving quietly around them. Sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow, because it was Sarah's second favorite song, because Emma needed something that spoke of hope and healing and dreams coming true. His voice was rough, rusty from 9 hours of fear, but it was real. The nurse nearest them stopped working, stood still, listened. When the song ended, Emma smiled. That beautiful smile that was all Sarah. "Your singing makes my heart feel better, Daddy." "I know, sweetheart, I know." And for the first time in 5 years, Marcus felt the weight he'd been carrying begin to lift. 18 months later, Marcus Hayes stood backstage at the Chicago Theater. But this time he wasn't wearing a janitor's uniform. He was here as a performer. The road from Emma's hospital bed to this moment had been anything but straight. After the surgery, while Emma recovered, 5 major record labels made offers simultaneously. Big money. National tours. Everything Marcus had once dreamed of. He turned them all down. "I won't leave Emma," he told each executive who called. "Not now. Not ever." Instead, he signed with Heartsong Records, an independent label run by artists, by people who understood that family came before fame, that some things mattered more than quarterly profits. His contract looked nothing like standard industry deals. Flexible schedule. Emma could travel with him everywhere. Marcus retained full ownership of his compositions, and 18% of all revenue went directly into a fund he'd established. The Unbreakable Voices Scholarship Program, for young singers from working-class backgrounds. No exploitative contracts, no NDAs, just training, legal education, and real support. First year, 65 scholarships. By year 3, 250. Marcus recorded his debut album with Sienna Rose, Silent No More, a collection of songs about reclaiming voice, speaking truth, daring to say no when the world expected silence. The album went gold in 8 weeks. Music videos were filmed in the places where Marcus's voice had truly been born. The community church where he'd sung with Sarah, the Chicago Theater where he'd once cleaned floors, the hospital room where he'd sung Emma through her recovery. In the final chorus, Emma appeared, her voice clear, precise, unafraid. Text on screen, "Your voice matters." Change in the industry came fast. Illinois passed the Hayes Act within 6 months, requiring full transparency for any live performance using pre-recorded vocals. Tickets must clearly disclose it. Violations treated as consumer fraud. Within 18 months, 15 states had similar laws. The Recording Academy overhauled its crediting rules. Every song submitted for awards must fully disclose all contributing vocalists. No more vague additional vocals credits. Every voice had to have a name. Spotify and Apple Music added detailed credits tabs. Studio singers who'd been invisible for decades finally got recognition. The Studio Singers Union formed, 2,500 members in its first year. Sienna Rose's career exploded. After 18 years in shadows, she appeared on magazine covers. Her debut solo album won a Grammy. In her acceptance speech, she said, "I was afraid for 18 years. A 32-year-old janitor showed me what courage looks like." And Victoria Sterling never recovered. 3 months after the court ruling, she filed for bankruptcy. The class action lawsuit ended with $28 million in ticket refunds. Her 3 Grammy Awards were officially revoked by the Recording Academy. She attempted a comeback tour 6 months later. Unplugged and unfiltered. Ticket sales reached 9%. After the 3rd show, the tour was canceled. The last anyone heard Victoria was teaching music business courses for an online college. But tonight wasn't about Victoria's fall. It was about what had risen. Marcus stood in the wings of the Chicago Theater, his heart pounding. This was his first major concert. 2,500 tickets, sold out in 4 hours. Before stepping on stage, he stopped by the custodial office, the familiar smell of cleaning solution and floor wax. Ray was there, holding his mop, wearing his navy blue uniform. "You did it, kid," Ray said. He put a hand on Marcus's shoulder, not like a father to a son, like two working men who respected each other. "No," Marcus said, "we did it. Everyone who was ever told their voice didn't matter." He walked onto the stage. Emma sat front row center, 8 years old now, healthy, radiant, wearing a t-shirt that read, "My dad's voice saved me." The audience wasn't wealthy patrons holding $500 tickets. It was working people, janitors and nurses and teachers and single parents, people who'd lined up early, who'd scraped together ticket money because they wanted to witness something real. Marcus opened with "Silent No More." His voice wasn't perfect. There were still traces of 5 years of silence. Rough edges that studio production could have smoothed, but Marcus chose to keep. Because they were honest. For the second song, he invited Sienna Rose on stage. Together they sang "Breaking Point." When they both reached the final D6 clear and accurate and entirely their own, the theater erupted. People were crying, standing. Ray was jumping up and down in the back, both arms raised. For the final song, Marcus called Emma on stage. "This is my daughter," he said. "2 years ago, I almost lost her. In that fear, I found my voice again. Not for fame, not for money, but for love." They sang "You Are My Sunshine" together. Emma's voice was small but true, following the melody Marcus taught her, father and daughter, creating something that had nothing to do with technique or training and everything to do with survival. As the last note faded, the cameras caught the theater's custodial staff, the people who'd worked alongside Marcus for 5 years, standing, applauding, many of them crying. Someone held up a sign, "We always knew you could sing." Marcus looked out at the audience, at faces that had once been invisible, now seen, now heard, now recognized as mattering. He spoke his final words of the night. To everyone who was ever told to stay silent, "You are not invisible anymore." The curtain fell to thunderous applause. If you made it this far, thank you, truly. Marcus's story isn't just about music. It's about truth, about courage, about how one ordinary person can change a broken system simply by refusing to stay quiet. Before you go, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel, how many people still believe that truth matters more than power, that doing the right thing even when it costs everything is worth it. And if you believe stories like this need to be told more often, stories about real people facing impossible choices and choosing courage anyway, hit that subscribe button. Because next time it might be your story that needs to be heard. Remember, your voice matters, every single one of you. See you in the next one.